Die nasionale gesondheidsversekering het die land behoorlik aan die gons. Gaan dit nou realiseer of nie? En ons het vanoggend vir Dr. Chris Archer, uitvoerende hoof van die Suid-Afrikaanse Privaat Praktisynsforum in die ateljee, om so 'n bietjie oor hierdie kwessie te gesels. So good morning and welcome.
Morning, Elsa.
I would like to focus on some background regarding the current state of affairs in terms of the NHI.
Well, at the moment, it's still in its formative sort of stage. It's really, I guess, going to go active in the full sense of the word in 2026, at which time our understanding is that the medical schemes there will be a proclamation in the government gazette, and medical schemes will no longer be allowed to offer funding for any service that would be offered by the National Health Insurance Fund. So that means that only complementary services will be able to be funded by the medical schemes industry. And then there will then be a single fund that will provide a comprehensive set of benefits for all South Africans.
Do you think they are realistic in terms of the time frame?
I think it's probably unlikely, given that we've been talking about this since 2010, and very little has changed since that time. But there does appear to be an increased urgency on the part of the government to deliver NHI at come what may.
But 2026, I thought that they want to do it like now, so it's still a very long process. Are people just up in arms too soon, or is it still wise to start complaining now or trying to
Well, I think
do something?
I think the problem is that there's a lot of uncertainty still. I mean, the bill sketches in broad outline what the government intends, but there are many questions that remain unanswered. And one of our concerns at the South African Private Practitioners Forum, this is a period of great uncertainty, particularly for young professionals who are currently in the private sector. Now, obviously, our perspective is predominantly private sector oriented. And what concerns us is during this period of uncertainty, a lot of young professionals might consider immigration because they don't know what the future will hold. And, how do we address that with them? Because we don't have enough information about, what the implications will be for them practicing medicine.
Yes. Now, the SAPPF strongly opposes the model selected for the NHI. Why is that?
Well, there are a number of reasons. I guess the first one is if you consider the fact that this decision to go the NHI route rather than the social health insurance route, which was the government policy prior to 2007, at the ANC elective conference in 2007, there was a decision taken at that time to move away to NHI. Now, as far as I'm aware, there was no research that preceded that decision. It was a populist decision taken on a political motive without any consideration as to the feasibility or the practicality or the suitability of that system for South Africa. And the World Health Organization has said repeatedly that although they believe universal healthcare should be the objective and aim of every country, each country needs to find its own particular solutions given its circumstances. Now, South Africa's situation is unique in the sense that we have a very strong private sector that serves a small minority of the population who are a privileged minority, and clearly there is inequity in that arrangement. And 84% of the country who cannot afford medical schemes are reliant on the state service. So we have a situation where the private sector is unaffordable to the majority of people, but the public sector is simply not delivering in terms of services to the majority. So something clearly has to change, and by saying that we oppose NHI does not mean that we oppose the concept of universal health care or the need for reform both in the private and the public sector. We do support, and we just think that this particular system hasn't been properly thought out. It's not the result of an analysis where it compares other models of universal health care with the NHI model. What they did was they did a socio-economic impact assessment, but they only compared three scenarios: maintaining the status quo, which nobody is suggesting is a solution; looking at full privatization, which again it's impractical, and nobody is suggesting that that's a solution; and NHI. Now NHI is simply one model, and we believe the single-payer model is not the right answer to provide the best quality services to the majority of South Africans. So that's I guess in a nutshell, why we have serious concerns about it.
Ons gaan voort met vanoggend se gesprek oor die nasionale gesondheidsversekering. Ons het vir Dr. Chris Archer, uitvoerende hoof van die Suid-Afrikaanse Privaat Praktisynsforum, hier by ons in die ateljee. How will the NHI be funded, and how will this impact taxpayers?
Well, the intention is it will be a service that's free at the point of delivery, funded by taxes, essentially. At the moment, because of the fiscal constraints that we are facing, there's really no room to add additional taxes. But ultimately, it has been suggested that a payroll tax and a surcharge on income tax may be necessary to assist in funding it. What they will be doing, however, for medical scheme members is removing the tax credit that all medical scheme members are rewarded by the government for not using the public service. So they will lose that tax credit, and that is also a concern, because probably as many as 1 million individuals who are currently members of medical schemes may find that simple reduction will make belonging to a medical scheme unaffordable for them. So there are some serious implications for medical scheme members going forward.
Is it you think they want to force kind of medical schemes to disappear so we can have this one? Because my concern is a practical side. If you don't have a medical scheme, you have to go to in Pretoria like a Steve Biko or Tygerberg in Cape Town. But is it now you got funding to go to a private hospital? What's the practical implications?
Well, all providers are going to have to be accredited. So you will only be able to go to a provider that has been accredited by the Office of Health Standards Compliance. And so that in itself will be a massive exercise, because not only will all the public facilities need to be accredited, but all private facilities willing to provide a service to NHI will also need to be accredited. There will obviously be certain providers who might opt out of providing services to NHI patients, but how their services will be funded is still unclear. What the bill proposes is that medical schemes following 2006 will only be allowed to fund services not provided by the National Health Insurance Fund. Now, what does that actually mean in practical terms? It means that patients who perhaps have unusual diseases or require medication that falls outside the formulary may feel compelled to continue to belong to a medical scheme. But for others who don't have a requirement for those sort of complementary services, there will be no point in them remaining as a member, because the basic services that they will require will not be allowed to be funded by their medical schemes. So the cost of belonging to a medical scheme, I believe, will increase dramatically, and probably most medical schemes will cease to exist as a consequence.
And then also again practical. If you go now, you used to go to a Steve Beaker. Now you go to one of the accredited hospitals. That hospital, do they invoice this fund, or who pays? Because now, I mean, you used to just go and get free medical, or you go to the clinic, and everyone. I mean, you're not going to go to the clinic. You're not going to go to a private hospital all of a sudden. But who invoices who?
Well, the single fund, the National Health Insurance Fund, will reimburse for services rendered by whoever the supplier of those services is, whether it's a public facility or a private facility. But the mechanism of how that's going to happen is not clear at the moment.
Isn't it more practical to kind of tax some medical schemes to, I mean, if you can trust the system, just to kind of fix our health system, our care system, the hospitals, the clinics, because I think that's the problem. If you go to some hospitals, it's not working. I mean, not everyone. Isn't that more a practical plan than this whole scheme?
Well, if you think about it, we already have a universal healthcare system. We have a private system which provides services of generally good quality to the privileged minority of members who can afford medical schemes. And the balance, the vast majority of people are still covered by the state health service. So there is a universal healthcare system in place already, but it's inequitable. It's unfair to the majority. And so on the one hand, we've got a system that's unaffordable for the majority, and then we have the public service system, which frankly isn't providing the quality of service that it needs to. So the public service needs to up its game, and we need to find mechanisms of making the private sector more accessible, which in a sense means more affordable. And there are ways in which we can do that. Yes. Yeah.
Because we need it. I think the divide is just too big again in South Africa. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Dit was dan Dr. Chris Archer, uitvoerende hoof van die Suid-Afrikaanse Privaat Praktisyns Forum.
Welkom by die Groot Ontbyt se YouTube kanaal. As jy nou net gehou het van wat jy gesien het, wel, klik op die playlist. En onthou, ons hou jou op hoogte van sake en voeg daagliks nuwe videomateriaal by. So, as jy dit graag wil sien, klik op die subscribe knoppie. Kom, klik. Nice. Ja, daar's hy, daai ene. Subscribe. Daar's hy.